Hey class, for some reason when I reformatted the page, this activity didn't really work out so well. So I'm going to make a quick video where you can actually see it. I'm going to see if I can link it into the email that I send it with, where I found this. So prior to 1918, here are 5 points about the history of divorce. You had to petition Parliament in order to get a divorce. In British Columbia, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, they had divorce courts specifically dedicated to divorce. Divorce was an exception rather than something that was pretty standard. It said only the husband could obtain a divorce, so a wife could not file for divorce. And you might notice I'm using husband and wife, and that's because it wasn't until much, much later, closing in here, that we talked about the legalization of gay marriage as well. Last but not least, prior to 1918, divorce must be based on adultery. Hopefully you know what adultery is. If you don't know what it is, look it up. And so it was the only basis in which you could file for divorce, and you had to prove that someone had committed adultery. You might have an inkling what that is. 1918 to 1945. So World War I to World War II. Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario had specific divorce courts much later than the other provinces. The wife could request a divorce, but had to show husband was guilty of fault without reasonable excuse. So it didn't have to be adultery, but there had to be a reason more than I've just fallen out of love with them. And certainly I would like to be with someone else wasn't reason enough for proof for a divorce. So you must obviously be proving something like abuse. So that's really what it's looking at in that particular one there. So let's go to 1968, when there was a lot of changes within Canadian law surrounding divorce. So the very first Divorce Act was in 1968, and that was making divorce, it was loosening the restrictions in order for someone to apply for or appeal for divorce. In every single province in Canada, there was uniform, meaning the same, divorce laws in every single province. Both genders have legal grounds for divorce, so women could now file for divorce as well. And divorce based on addiction to drugs, desertion of 5 years. So if your partner walked out on you and abandoned you, maybe for something else or a different life, it had to be in up to 5 years. 3 years separation. So previous to 1968, the amount of time that you were separated or living in separate houses was more than 3 years. So if you wanted to divorce, you had to have a minimum of 3 years separation living in separate residences. Adultery or cruelty were also reasonable grounds in which to get a divorce. 1985, there was some addendums made to the Divorce Act. So it was revised in 1985. People could file for divorce jointly so that the two partners could say, give me 1 second. It was not going to come out of my mouth, so I'm putting it up here. Irreconcilable. There we go. Where both members agree that they cannot reconcile their differences. And so that would be a reason why two people could actually file for the divorce, that you don't actually have to file for it, then serve the other with the divorce, that you could both go in together, and it would probably be processed a little bit faster. So in 1985, instead of 3 years or more of separation, it was 1 year or three fault actions that you proved adultery, mental cruelty, or physical cruelty. And cruelty is another word for abuse. So 2004, this is where we have the changes to same-sex laws, and that we allowed for same-sex marriages. And when you allow for same-sex marriages, different provinces took their time, and you can actually look up the history of same-sex marriage laws. Alberta was the last province in Canada in order to allow gay marriages. And in 2004, divorce available to same-sex couples was allowed. So if you're going to allow marriage, then you have to make concessions for divorce. So I'm so sorry that this activity wasn't really working when you clicked on the link. Hopefully you were able to follow through with this video.